I'm Aryeh Schwartz, along with my co-host, Rachel Galligan, and welcome to the Winsidr Show, where it's all about the W. Today, we're talking biggest upsets of the 2019 season. The season has been a roller coaster. Teams winning here, then losing there, and then winning here again, and then losing here. I mean, there has not been a dominant team. We all thought the Connecticut Sun were going to be that, but now a 2-game losing skid has kind of changed our perspective. So today, we're talking biggest upsets of the 2019 season. If you like our show, please consider joining our Patreon community. For less than a cup of coffee a month, you can directly show support for the hard work we do covering the W. Rachel, I always get flack from the Gala fans for not giving you a chance to say hello in the beginning of the show. So
do you?
I in the past I've gotten flack, so I'm cutting it off quick, you know.
Hi everybody, how are you? Great to be here. See, I don't like that. I never know what to say. So what they don't know is I told you not to let me.
So we're talking upsets. I mean, I think as hard as any season has been, I mean, you get some upsets in the W. That's not a question. But this season, because there has not been that clear favorite with various injuries, various players sitting out, various players on new teams, a lot of teams trying to find the cohesiveness of that team. There's been it's hard. Rachel and I went through looking at all the games so far this season and saying, could it possibly be an upset or not? And there was like 3 options, really, right?
Yeah, it is, and I think it's just fascinating to look at this season so far because there's so many different circumstances. You know, from talking about the Seattle Storm, you could look on paper, if we were talking 2 months ago about the Sky beating the Storm, that looks like an upset. But where we are today on June 28th, when we're recording, that's not really an upset because of everything that's kind of happened and how well the Sky are playing as of now, and obviously the things that the Storm are battling. And so I think the upsets are there. We have had some, and we're going to get to those, but I think we're going to see upsets later on in the season that are going to be defined because of what's transpired early in the season, if that makes sense. Do you follow me?
Oh, totally. And I think you're spot on there. I hate to agree, but I agree. But yeah, no, 100%. I mean, come later in the season when you have maybe, I don't want to put teams in a box or whatever, but I think we've seen from various teams early on in the season, teams that the voices that be would project them to not be playoff teams have come up, shown out, and beaten some teams that some people have expected to be championship contenders. I think it will obviously be a bigger upset or shock if this happens later in the season,
Yeah.
But that being said, if you could do it early in the season, you got to have confidence going into that late season game, thinking we've beaten them before, we can beat them again, because they're growing also.
Mm-hmm. And I really feel like, you know, we talk about it quite a bit, but at least in my adult lifetime, I'm not going to say my age because that's no fun, but
happy birthday, by the way. Happy belated birthday.
Thank you. That graphic was just incredible. I appreciate it. It like almost made me cry. But anyway, I really feel like, great, now I lost my train of thought. No, so I really feel like, you know, like everything is so wide open through the course of probably the last 10 years. I don't know, but, you know, I'm generalizing here. You know, there's always been clear favorites, or we've seen the 2 top dogs, or, you know, you had dynasties. And this is such a year that's fascinating because of the injuries, because of different teams stepping up and other teams in rebuilds or new coaching, you know, coaching changes, things like that. This is just such a year where it is just wide open. I mean, we're probably going to have a champion that maybe none of us had anticipated. I mean, it could happen. That entirely could happen. I shouldn't say it. We probably will.
And I'll step it up and say, I mean, think about the All-Star game with all the injuries and whatnot. Let's assume we don't see some players, you know, like Candace or I don't even know who else, like, or Taurasi or whatever, get like that like, I don't want to call it a pity vote, but the historic vote, if you will. other than that, I mean, like I'm going down the list. I could see like one of the Agumekes making it, but other than that, I have a feeling like Deladon's going to be by far, and this isn't a knock to Deladon, but like she's going to be by far the biggest name, if not the only big name at the All-Star game.
Yeah, I think you're going to have a lot of new blood in the All-Star game. I mean, it should, unless we're just voting on, the names, if you will, because the names.
Or maybe our votes don't even count. Conspiracy theorists go.
Right. Well, I mean, and then the names, they haven't played, so how do they make an All-Star game? It's just interesting to me. But we're going to see, obviously, I would assume Allie Quigley will be in it, or maybe even Diamond DeShields could potentially be in it. I think we're going to see some new names that I think is good for the game. I'm excited to see that, not to get us too off topic, but that's a great point. The fact that, it's just wide open. This is a season of just brand new opportunities all across the board.
Okay, well, you said it, so you got me off topic. I just need to, we talked about our last podcast episode was right before the Mystics and the Sky faced off, and it was a great battle going back and forth. You could tell the intensity was high for both teammates or both teams, and Deladon just straight like dagger, just destroy. Like that was such a heartbreaking but amazing play by Deladon.
Oh
I mean, it was, and she made that same play a few times. I mean, my favorite play of the game, though, besides the game winning shot or the game dagger shot, was definitely when Deladon just put Dolson for like a freaking wash cycle or whatever they call it.
She was a savage in that game. I mean, she was just straight. She went straight savage on everybody, and it was kind of like, all right, you can't even be mad about it because the storylines behind it, the fact that we know what Elena can do, and in my opinion, she's elevating her game. She's getting more and more comfortable out there each and every game, and we're seeing her, continue to get her legs underneath her and all that sort of stuff. But she was just savage, and of course, she had to do it against the Sky, and I'm just like, man. All right, you can't even say anything. You kind of just have to smile and like shake your head, like, all right then.
I in my opinion, from a the ridiculous person I am, I would have to say just based off watching the game, it was much more evident than we thought going into it that there was some not necessarily bad blood, but just like a little bit, you want to prove yourself. It's like going up against your ex, your whatever. And you're like, you got to show off a little bit extra.
Yeah.
I think both teams were going for that. The Mystics wanted to do it for Deladon. The Sky have a few players who might still be scoring or might still have those feelings, and a player who was traded for her, and now has watched her former team blossom to go to the finals. Mm-hmm. So there's definitely like you can downplay it, and the players and the coaches and the ownership and whoever else and the media can all say, hey, this wasn't as big a deal. It's been 3 years, blah, blah, blah. But I'm calling BS on that.
That's the PR response. You get that. I mean, be real. Yeah. There's that's just what you have to say in the media. We all know there's more to that. Anyway, keep going.
Yeah, no, sorry. I blame you for that tangent. But let's move on. Biggest upsets. I know you and I kind of view things a little bit differently on this regard. I'll let you go first and talk to me about which game you think was the biggest upset so far this season and give a little reason why.
I think the most recent people would probably identify Dallas beating Connecticut. And there's definitely an argument to be made with that. Not sure where you stand on it. But for me, my opinion is the biggest upset was New York over LA. At LA, correct? Yeah, they played at LA.
Yeah.
So I'm really impressed with that. Now, granted, I understand that LA, is having early growing pains, and at that time, Candace Parker was not playing, and so you do have some circumstances there. But it's still LA, and it's still the Sparks, and they're playing at home, and you've got the Ogumake sisters, you've got Chelsea Gray who goes off for 18. I mean, if you tell me that NECA and Shanae combined for 46 points, and then Chelsea Gray adds 18. I'm like, well, yeah, they're going to beat the Liberty. So I felt like that was a really impressive game. I really felt like, it was a high scoring game, both teams in the 90s, but I just really feel like, the Liberty came out, they were able to score. Obviously, Amanda Zahui goes off for 37. Who could have?
37, which is crazy though, because she didn't even get a double-double.
Right. I mean, who could have ever predicted that? And that's why I think because of that 37, it has to be one of the biggest upsets, because if she doesn't do that, like, they don't win that game, in my opinion.
Oh yeah, I mean, talk to me about the last time. If I were to tell you Tina Charles scores 9,
right?
how do you think? Do you think New York wins? You would think I'm crazy.
I know. Yeah, and I mean, and then you look, Kia Nurse goes off for 26, which that's not chopped liver there. So those two just play completely out of their minds. I mean, especially Zahui B. I mean, goodness gracious, who could have ever predicted that she'd have a game like that? And she goes 7 for 8 from the 3-point line. I mean, just unconscious. So I think when you have a player who's unconscious on that level and just completely feeling herself, going off and having a career night in LA on the road, I mean, that's pretty impressive. And obviously the Liberty have struggled, and they're one of the bottom teams in the league in terms of winning and everything they're building from last year. I still stand by my comment about them potentially being one of the most dangerous teams, and this is exactly why. You just never, you just don't know. Like, who could have ever thought this could happen? So it's dangerous because it's a complete unknown. You don't really know what team you're going to get. You have some inconsistencies from a scoring standpoint, from a defensive standpoint, but man, they'll come out and do something like this and beat the top team in the league, or one of the top teams in the league. So I think it was the biggest upset in my opinion. But I do understand the argument of it being downplayed by LA not really being at full strength. So what about you?
Well, so I'm all right. First I'm gonna throw some shade at your pick, and then I'm gonna explain my pick is the right one.
All right.
But my disagreement with this, and the reason that I mean, you touch on it. I think it's Dallas versus Connecticut is, to me, the biggest upset of the season by far. And the reason is because at the time, LA was 4-3, I believe, and New York was 3-5. So yes, that is an upset, but to me, I did not put LA at that top tier impressiveness. I mean, we're talking about a New York Liberty team that, you pointed this out, is a very dangerous team. They had gotten 3 wins already. They had already broken that almost historic losing streak that they had. I believe this win against LA was actually, maybe it was the game before it when they played Vegas and they won, but the game against LA or the game against Vegas actually was the breaking of the away game curse that they had. It was at 17 games also, or something ridiculous like that. So there's definitely reasons why I hear where you're coming from, but to me, the Sparks weren't high enough of a team, weren't great enough of a team that for me to see the Liberty to beat them, I was shocked, but I didn't view it as the biggest upset. For me, I mean, you look at the Dallas Wings team, 3-6 right now, struggled to get that first win, get the win, turn it into a win streak. Connecticut was rolling. Yes, they just came off of a loss. Yes, they were on their away game trip for 3 or 4 games. I believe they're finishing their trip in DC this Saturday. I'm excited to be there and see what goes on. But for me, taking a team that all of us were so hyped on, and right before this Wings game, they had just lost to Chicago, and right before this Wings game, I remember sitting there and going, okay, Rachel, we talked about this. How do they respond? This will say a lot for us. This has been the only team that has been consistently great this season. And then, I mean, just a horrible third quarter. Wings score 24, Connecticut only 17, just could not figure it out. Fourth quarter starts off strong, but Dallas is able to pull away the win. And taking a Dallas team that struggled so bad, they were the last team to get a win in the league, if I'm correct. And then to take on the top team in the league and beat them, even though it was on home court, to me, I was just like, did that actually
I agree
happen?
with you. And I definitely, I guess I'm torn, and it just depends on kind of the angle you look at these. I definitely think that what you're saying makes sense. So I'm not going to retract what I said, but I'm still going to agree with you. So that just contradicts myself. But I think the thing about this Connecticut-Dallas game, at least in my mind, let me just kind of explain why the other one is a little bit more of an upset. And this is not a knock to Katie Smith, anything like that, but I have a lot of respect for Brian Agler and his coaching ability. I think it's been proven. Yeah,
on
I mean,
many
we've
teams.
seen firsthand what he's able to do from a defensive standpoint, and he's just a really incredible basketball mind. And so I'm not surprised that, like, the tools on this roster, especially, you have the young ones, you have some returners, and they're hungry. They're wanting to learn to be a little more cohesive and play together. They're buying in on the defensive end of the floor. They were doing a really good job leading up to this game. A lot of the games, they were close in, things like that. So you got the sense that wins were coming. So I guess for me, I'm not as surprised, and I guess the biggest reason is Brian Agler, and I just genuinely mean that because of just what I believe he can do as a coach and what he's proven. So, but if you take that,
But wait, on the flip side, not to throw shade at Derek Fisher or what you're saying, but for me, yes, I get where you're coming from, but there's still that unknown. You know what I mean? Like, you have two great coaches going against each other, Connecticut and Dallas, and I totally hear where you're coming from. I just
No,
like playing devil's advocate, but when the LA side, I just feel like I don't even know how to say it without like somebody getting pissed at me. But Derek Fisher has not proven himself as a coach in this league or proven himself as a coach.
you don't have
period.
to put on me
And
getting pissed at that comment.
No, but you know what I'm saying. Like, and this isn't a knock against him. I mean, the biggest critique besides, like, he did not have a good stint in New York. Let's just be flat out. The biggest positive you could say, in many ways, was that it was simply because he didn't get to actually control it. It was all Phil Jackson. Fine, get it, cool. So now he has to prove himself. So he's just a big question mark. He's a walking, talking question mark to me, And so in the same way Lindsay Whalen is right now, in the same way Dawn Staley was when she took over. Just because you're a really great player does not translate to being a great coach.
Same thing with
So for me, yeah. No, so exactly. You have two former players who have won rings as players now getting their coaching feet or their sea legs or whatever the term is. So for me, that's more of an even keel.
Okay.
But I do love the connection of Kurt Miller and Brian Agler to kind of spice up that matchup between Connecticut and Dallas.
I love it too. The fact that Kurt Miller got his start in the WNBA under Brian Agler. So these are two guys that know each other very well. They know their philosophies very well. They've known each other for years. So that just makes it even better. I mean, it's an ultimate chess match. And you're dealing with, like, Dallas is dealing with, their circumstances and kind of a hodgepodge roster at times. You get the sense, but man, you have to really. You have to credit Dallas for that win, and especially the way Connecticut's played this entire season as the most dominant it was. Now your theory when we talked last week on the show of, well, I'm not sure that, like, can they keep it going, or are they going to hit a consistent rough patch? Well, now they've dropped 2 in a row. Am I correct? 2 in a row. So.
Two in a row, and they're about to have their third away game. And last year, that's when they got their skid, when they hit their 3 or 4 game travel on the West Coast.
Yeah, so keeping an eye on that and just kind of how this Sun team responds, being out on the road and 2 losses. How where's their headspace at? How are they responding? Are they able to get back in the win column? You have to think that that's the only goal right now is, not allowing this to turn into something bigger than what it is.
Yeah, you can't do that, because that's just when it hits the fan and things start to spiral out of control. And like I said, the biggest question for Connecticut in my mind is, how do you keep that drive, that motivation all season long when you've already hit all those check marks in season accomplishments? How do you and that a lot goes on the coaches. You have to find ways to get creative. Obviously, yes, everything always comes down to the players are going to need to motivate themselves in ways. But to me, keeping it consistent, keeping it fresh, Kurt's going to have to get creative with ways to inspire this team day in and day out.
Well, I don't know how much I agree with that. Shocking. I mean, this is a intrinsically motivated team that's after a championship. And so... And they're young, but they're a mature team, in my opinion. This is a team that is like they went through bumps last year, so they're going to go through bumps together again this year, and just innately they're going to respond to them better because they've been together another year. They have that experience. So I'm by no means like panicking. Again, I always get back to my same old philosophy of every team hits patches, every team hits streaks. It's all about how you respond. But it is interesting to kind of see like just having a pulse on that organization right now, and how do they make sure that they can get themselves to be peaking come playoff time? That's the ultimate goal, and setting yourself for a deep playoff run, which in the WNBA means that double bye. So just going to be very curious, especially these upcoming games, and kind of how they're responding.
Yeah, totally. Rachel, as always, you hit it on the head, and I appreciate you putting up with my takes. But I did want to do one honorable mention before we close out for the night, the day, whenever you're listening, the morning. I want to give an honorable mention to the Storm beating the Mercury in opening weekend, and the reason is going into that game, Taurasi's gone. I mean, you look at the rosters, Sue's gone, and Stewie's gone. You look at that, and I think everybody very quickly and too quickly wrote Seattle off. I've said this a billion times in interviews and on the podcast. They recalibrated so much quicker and better than anyone in the league expected.
Right.
So I do want to give that honorable mention shout out. Obviously, yes, the Mercury have kind of doggy paddled, fluttered, whatever you want to call it throughout the season. But there is a lot to be said about that first game really a driving force for Seattle.
Yeah, I agree. I agree on that take for sure.
Dope. Well, we believe the players of the WNBA and its community deserve the same in-depth analysis and respect that men's sports receive on a daily basis. Please consider joining our Patreon community to help support us and the hard work that we do. This has been the Winsidr Show.